Grand Theft Auto is a franchise known for giving us 3D sandbox fun action on handhelds. Well, okay, that's actually wrong. It's known for doing that on a specific era of handhelds with the PlayStation Portable. To this day, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories from the PSP remains my favorite game of the series, and returning to not only that city but Liberty and Los Santos on the Switch made me pretty happy. These new releases have come with some controversy though, so let's dive into it. Here is my review of Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to story, each of these games talks about crime and gang wars in 3 dangerous cities. In GTA 3, you play as Claude, a thief betrayed by his own girl and left to pick up the pieces with Italian mob bosses like the Leones. It's a very classic old-timey crime lord feel with betrayal and all the genre-specific accents you'll expect from it. In Vice City, you play as Tommy, who takes part in a drug deal gone sour. Picking up the pieces of that deal, he treks through the 1980s beach town of Vice City to find the culprits and slowly take over. Finally, San Andreas has a different take on things. You play as CJ, who's come home to Los Santos after his mother was caught in a gang war drive-by in the middle of the hood. You and your bros then tackle the nearby gangs to find out who is responsible for your mama's death. Now, overall, I think each of these stories is decently well done. 3 is probably the weakest overall, with Claude being a silent protagonist, but fans of old school crime bosses will still find a lot of enjoyment and entertainment from all of these games. When it comes to gameplay, these 3 are sandbox-style third-person shooters with a ton of exploration, missions, and side content to dive into. Now first of all, these new versions are like the old but updated with new graphics, UI changes, and controls. Also, since someone has already asked me, the hot coffee minigame from San Andreas is not in this new version, though some of the code for it is still in the files. They did keep the most important thing though. Cheat codes are still present in the game, and most of the old PS2 codes still work on the new platforms. There are a few exceptions like the invisible cars from Vice City, but all of the big ones like weapon sets, spawning the tank, and health and armor maximums are still here and able to be used. Other quality of life improvements include the weapon wheel, improved aiming and car control, and the inclusion of gyro controls for the Switch version. The latter is great for the first-person mode guns like the sniper rifle. When it comes to main progression, these games have huge sandbox maps with NPCs you can go to for story missions. As you go through each of these, the story will expand, and so will the map. You start each game in one area with the rest of it blocked off, but as you progress the story, new areas will open up and you'll get little radio messages to talk about what story-related thing blocked it, like a storm warning closing bridges in Vice City, an excuse that was repeated in Vice City Stories. Now, the truly great thing about these games being on the Switch are how quick and simple the missions in these older Grand Theft Auto games were. When you start out, you just drive a short distance, do a little combat, and you're done. Even later on in the game, it's still a relatively simple process if you know what you're doing. With autosave being a thing, making it so that you don't always have to trek across the map back to your house to save, the game structure is great for pick up and play gameplay. But not everything about it is great. These games are nostalgic for people, but they're still pretty old games. Vice City and 3 still have instant death when dropping into water. Many of the heavier guns require you to stand still while aiming instead of being able to strafe. And San Andreas controls for flying vehicles is still clunky and slippery, to be pretty kind about it. Just go in expecting the games to be the same as they always were instead of being updated. San Andreas, for example, is still the only PS2 GTA game with the muscle, fat, and car tweaking systems. But don't get me wrong, the clunkiness and dated stuff doesn't make it not fun. The more I've been playing these games, especially with 3 and Vice City bringing back my memories of the Stories games on PSP, the more fun I've had. It was a nice era of GTA when you could go through a mission, get frustrated after so long, spawn a tank out of thin air and say, okay fine, you want to play this game? We'll play this game. Leading to a very explosive clearing of the mission and probably a big police chase afterwards. I personally think the cheats combined with the other mechanics are really what made these games so much mindless fun back in the day. Speaking of how much fun there is to be had, each of these games have decent length to them. They should take you about 15 to 20 hours apiece for their main story, not counting the hours I've already spent in Vice City just parking, swapping to V-Rock, and listening to jams right outside my objective. Now, let's get to the main issue with these remasters across not only the Switch, but all platforms: presentation. Visually, these ports look okay. The remaster redid a lot of the character models to look a bit better, and as far as the Switch version, it certainly looks more clear than the PS2, though it does get pretty blurry in handheld mode. Performance, however, is the big hill of this remaster. Traveling in the sandbox leads to a lot of frame drops across all platforms. The PS4 versions struggle to keep 30 FPS, often dipping down into the mid to high 20s. The Switch versions drop down a bit lower, as was seen in my stream of San Andreas a few weeks back. It is a little better than launch though. All three of these games got a small patch not long ago that improved but didn't completely fix this. The sandbox FPS is a bit smoother, though a lot of big cinematics can really chug whenever explosions happen, along with you doing the races in San Andreas causing a lot of big dips. It's improving, just not quite there yet. That's all I have to say about performance, so let's dive into battery life. The GTA Trilogy gives the original model a battery range of 2 hours and 43 minutes up to 3 hours and 22. It gives the Nintendo Switch Lite a range of 3 hours and 30 up to 5 hours and 12. The Redbox or V2 2019 model gets a range of 4 hours and 28 up to 5 hours and 47. And the OLED model gets a range of 5 hours and 13 up to 6 hours and 38. In conclusion, the PS2 GTA Trilogy is finally available on a handheld console, retaining the wacky gang wars, sandbox exploration, and cheat codes that made those games fun back in the day. However, the still present clunkiness of many gameplay features and more importantly the lack of performance optimization begs the question of whether you should play it now or wait until a few patches have come out. Reviews to Go rates Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch a 6.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.